it well. Played it very, very, very well indeed.
No more slices for you.
Oh, look at that for judgment.
You'll learn.
Hello everybody, welcome to Slice, sponsored by True Linkswear. It is Monday the 17th of August, except of course that it isn't. Sam and I recording the last of our summer specials, if we can call them that, in between holidays. Sam is just off the plane, I am soon to get on the plane. So we're actually recording this on Wednesday the 12th. That means you will not get reaction to the FedEx St. Jude, the Danish Golf Championship, the US Amateur, the Irish Challenge, anything else going on, the LET, the LPGA, Corn Ferry Tour. It's a busy week, or it was a busy week in the world of golf, but we don't know what happened, so we're not going to talk about it. What we do know is that Sam has had a wonderful time, surely, on holiday in Greece. How was it? Did you bump into Peter Karmis or any other Greek golfing legends?
I didn't, unfortunately. It's a strange one, Ben. I'm feeling simultaneously rejuvenated and relaxed, and also really tired because I had one of those holidays where we didn't really do much, just sort of sat on the beach, swam for a bit, snorkeled for a bit, had a beer, and then rinse and repeat. It was one of those type of holidays. But then we had the inevitable getting back late last night, and everything was conspiring against us, the baggage reclaim, then like an accident on the motorway on the way home. So it meant that it was a very late night. So if I look tired, that's the reason. But I am actually feeling rejuvenated and ready for, a new season of Sliced, if you like.
Splendid. Well, thank you for going the extra mile for our beloved listeners. If you are new, do subscribe, like, rate, review. We need all that stuff. But also, the last couple of weeks, we've done a couple of actual bonus episodes, just replacing our usual Monday. We had an interview with Eugenio Shikara, which is well worth listening to. He talks about everything from college golf, live golf, PGA Tour ambitions, DP World Tour wins, and all that sort of stuff. And we also did a top 20 of our favourite DP World Tour courses, which is one for the purists, and I'm sure will appeal to some. So yeah, that's what we've had over the last couple of weeks. But then next Monday we'll be back to the usual stuff, reflecting on the BMW Championship and everything else. If I've got my dates right, I think I have. Yes,
that sounds right. I think, yeah.
I'm preparing for the British Masters, Sam. So it's a busy time coming up.
Exactly. That's something. Getting back from holiday, you always be like, it's a bit. You have the sadness, don't you? Of okay, it's back to the daily grind. But I thought, you know what? I've got the British Masters to look forward to. We're going to hopefully chat to some of the best players in the world. We'll try and get some content then, as we did last year. And yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to.
Absolutely. And just to correct you there, Sam, one gathers content. You don't get content. You got to look. If we're going to compete with these youngsters, we got to get the vernacular correct. So we'll be content gathering at the British Masters, which is a terrifying prospect.
It is a little bit, yeah. Well, you've very helpfully, Ben. I mean, normally I'm kind of in charge of the little document we have where we, go through what we're going to talk about, and you've done it this time, and you wanted to start off with what we've missed. Sort of since we've been gone, since I've been gone. And initially, the first thing to talk about is obviously the DP World Tour has been on a break. It is going to be back by the time you listen to this recording. But PGA Tour, we had Michael Thorbjornsen and Michael Brennan both following Jackson Koiven. So we've got three really young, talented players all winning 1 week after another. And obviously there's a conversation around the President's Cup and who might of those three get into the side. Do you have any initial thoughts on that? I know we talked about Koiven, hadn't we? And I think we were both of the view a few weeks ago that we felt like he merited a place on that team if he did enough to get himself into the playoffs, which he has done now. But obviously now you've got two more, very good players who've maybe entered themselves into the conversation.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating conversation. And actually, I think the outcome might be something altogether different, because hearing Brandt Snedeker the other day, it sounded like he was going to play a pretty straight bat with his side. And I suppose that speaks to the fact that his job is to win the President's Cup, and that's it. And, you could argue that, it would benefit the United States to link that or tether it to the Ryder Cup. And have Jim Furyk even play some sort of role in the way that Luke Donald does with the Team Cup, which is sort of on a much smaller scale, but helps Europe kick off their Ryder Cup year. So maybe the USA are missing a trick, but at the moment, Snedeker's priority is to win the President's Cup, and we may all take for granted that they will do that whatever he does, unless he, picks a bunch of his mates who are on the Champions Tour, in which case perhaps not. But his job is to take this very seriously, and I suspect we're moving towards a position where actually maybe none of these three players get in. But what I wanted to talk about briefly was this fascinating sort of dichotomy between the President's Cup standings, the form these players have shown, and the playoff system and the FedEx Cup. Because at the moment, as things stand, Jackson Koiven will have to play very, very well, or have to have played very well at Southwind. Otherwise, his playoffs is going to end there. Data Golf make him about 11-1 to make it to the BMW Championship. Michael Brennan and Michael Thorbjornsen will almost certainly, Thorbjornsen will certainly be at the BMW. Brennan should be sort of 1-20 to get there. And Bellerive is a course that's great for both of those players. So they're going to have potentially more opportunities to impress. And then if you go further up the points list, well, Akshay Bhatia and Jacob Bridgman, to name but two, are guaranteed to be at Eastlake. So they've got 3 tournaments to impress, with selections made after that. So it really is interesting, I think, to put all that together. And you've got players like Alex Smalley, who is way higher in the President's Cup point scoring because he finished runner-up in a major than Koiven has had the opportunity to be, than Brennan is, and then Thorbjornsen is. And it's all very complicated because in isolation, none of these things are the best way to judge who deserves that place. But I suspect Brandt Snedeker will refer to all of them. And there's one final dynamic which I'll add, which I do find fascinating, and I think this helped Justin Thomas. When Justin Thomas failed to qualify for the playoffs at the Wyndham Championship in 2023, is that right? And was named in the Ryder Cup side, I think he almost did himself a favour, because what happened thereafter was the guys he was competing with for a wild card did not play well at the very difficult Southwind. Now, if Justin Thomas, the way he was playing, had gone to Southwind and finished 58th, then it would have been further evidence that he's not worth the risk. But he couldn't, because he wasn't able to qualify. And I think we could see that with Koiven, where if Koiven doesn't get to the BMW Championship, but none of Bhatia, Bridgman, Smalley, Thorbjornsen, Brennan, maybe Ryan Gerrard and a few others, none of them plays well, then his hand is strengthened in his absence. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of moving parts there. But what an embarrassment of riches the USA and Brandt Snedeker have.
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to your previous point about Snedeker, unfortunately, they are very much in isolation, aren't they, the President's Cup and Ryder Cup? And I know from afar we can sort of say, well, why wouldn't you play Koiven and get him ready for the Ryder Cup? But I suppose Brandt Snedeker doesn't want to be the one who takes a risk or too many risks and then ends up being the first losing captain in however long. So he's his hands are slightly tied by that. He wants to go for there's a temptation for him to play it safe. Whether or not that is safe, though, if he's to pick, say, Patrick Cantlay, for example, who hasn't really been playing anywhere near his best, or several other players you could say the same for. A lot of it depends on what happens over the next couple of weeks. I think, like you say, if you make it to Eastlake, then you've got just more chances to prove yourself, like you say, and obviously you will move up the rankings as well. I would question the President's Cup standings, however they're calculated. The thing that I wonder is, does it actually make, unless you're in the lock spaces, the top 6, does it really make a difference? Like if you're on that, say Alex Smalley is at number 9, do you think that really does make a difference? Or at that point, is it a kind of free-for-all in terms of the captain's picks?
That's a really great question. I mean, at the moment, like the guys is Gotterup, Spawn, Schauffele, Clark and Thomas are sort of in the next few spots. I mean, how is Wyndham Clark not in the top 6? He's won twice. Bizarre, doesn't it? How are they calculating this? He's not in the top 6, but Russell Henley is 3rd. Well, Russell Henley's won the Colonial this year. Wyndham Clark has won the Byron Nelson, broadly equivalent, and the US Open. This is madness. However they're doing it wrong. But anyway, I guess you're right. Maybe it doesn't actually matter. I just tend to think like the guy in 7th always gets picked, but I suppose that's more because they inherently are doing something well. I mean, you mentioned Cantlay there. Is there a big name who you think doesn't deserve to be there? Because I'll put my cards on the table. I think I understand there's an argument for Cantlay being that big name, but I think it would be madness to drop Patrick Cantlay. I think there are other players I could be, I could be tempted to drop. I think Ben Griffin hasn't done enough, to be honest, but he looks like he might somehow qualify incongruously. But I think it'd be madness not to take Cantlay.
I put Cantlay ahead of Griffin, definitely. Just his sort of credentials in the team format above anything else. Griffin's only played one Ryder Cup, and he was okay, not brilliant. But I think I wouldn't necessarily put Griffin in the sort of big names bracket. When you say big names, I'm thinking those who've played several, who you might consider leaving out. Whether that's a Justin Thomas or Patrick Cantlay, Jordan Spieth. He's not really in the conversation at all, but that type of player. But yeah, I take your point. I think Cantlay, I suspect he will end up in the team, but I just hope it's not at the expense of Koiven, let's say, because I do think that I would like to see him there, just because I think he's an exciting young player. But that's just purely from a selfish perspective, and I think it will make it interesting for a lot of people.
It would, wouldn't it? Can we, if you don't mind, us just spending 1 or 2 minutes quickly on the individuals? I just wanted to know sort of how much of it you saw. I know you've been away, but the point I wanted to make, and I know I labour this point, but Michael Thorbjornsen hit 2 of the best drives you will ever see under the gun to win. I know maybe that's a bit much. It's not a major. It's quite a wide open golf course in Detroit. But 17 and 18, having hit the front with the tournament in the palm of his hand, he absolutely nuked 2 tight draws, 330 yards or whatever they were down the middle. Just really stepped up. And it's hard to get away from the fact that people are calling this guy a loser because he bombed out in the Players, and he in Phoenix when he hit the front he bogeyed I think the 16th hole, and then he was close to the lead in Houston, had a tough Sunday, and then an even more vivid demonstration that these things are fluid. Brennan has been in the mix 3 weeks running, and the first 2 weeks he completely bombed out, and I had people tweeting me saying, "Oh, this guy's a choker." And it's like the guy's played 30 PGA Tour events and he has won 2 of them. And I'll be honest, Sam, I think Michael Brennan, I don't know as the golfing world at large. I think a lot of experts and people who follow it closely will share this view. But I think this guy is I almost think there's as much potential there as there is with Koiven. I'll be honest. I don't, because of the different paths they've taken. Obviously, he went and dominated the 3rd tier and has bypassed the Corn Ferry Tour, and Koiven's come straight out of college where, don't get me wrong, his exploits have been phenomenal. But Brennan is he could be an absolute superstar.
Ben,
soon as well.
I've been banging this drum for a while on this very podcast. You may remember. I remember saying that I was impressed by the way that he could play courses that you wouldn't think would suit a kind of a quote unquote bomber. I remember him playing well at Colonial. I think he did all right at Harbour Town as well. He's played well on basically every type of golf course. He's obviously made the cut in all 4 majors, which is, it's quite impressive in itself, even though he hasn't been in contention in any of them. But yeah, I think he's got a really, really solid game, and I think he's going to go far. And you're right. I think he's been slept on, I think, a bit over the last year. Obviously, he came sort of bursting out, didn't he? He won very quickly last year, and he hasn't done a whole lot over the first half of the season. But he's one of those that when it all comes together, and it does all come together every now and again, he is really good. So yeah, I'm certainly not against him getting a place in that President's Cup team as well. If he needs to probably play well this week. The week we were talking, we won't know what's happened by the time this goes out. But yeah, I think he's definitely a big player for the future, and maybe I dare say slightly underrated.
How many of them out of this trio, never mind the President's Cup, how many of them are on the Ryder Cup team next year?
2. I'm not going to say which 2, but 2 of them.
I'd say 2, unless we have to name
because
I think Thorbjornsen has enormous scope as well. I think essentially these are 3 of the American players who in 10 years' time, granted sort of fair water, will be. Is that a saying? I just said it like it was a saying. I'm not sure it is, but it is now. But, all things being equal, in 10 years' time, these are going to be 5 years' time, 10 years' time. These are going to be, big American golfers for a long, long time. Whether it happens in time for the Ryder Cup and stuff, I think we'll look back on this 3-week run as really the birth of a new wave of superstar golfers.
And I think it's worth saying as well, Ben, things can change really quickly, as we've seen. I mean, Jackson Koiven, people were talking about him a year ago, of course, but there's been a lot of noise over the recent months, and all of a sudden he's a winner, and people are like, yeah, he needs to be on a President's Cup team, he needs to play the Ryder Cup. Who's to say whether Ben James might do the same sort of thing? Give him a few weeks, few months, then maybe he suddenly wins, and then people are talking about him. We had Eugenio Chikara talking about Preston Stout on the podcast about how much potential he has. So these players, and it's helped by the PGA Tour University scheme, can very quickly get onto tour and they can win very quickly, and they're ready to win. So there will be other names that we're not even talking about now, I suspect, in a year's time, who are maybe on the fringes of those conversations.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw this as well, just to round out. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to access it in time as I type away here, but I believe Justin Ray tweeted, was Ben James the first or one of the only players in history to shoot 62 twice in an event and not win it? So it was a real mixed bag from him at the Wyndham. And to your point on Brennan, I know it's the second year in a row now we've had a bomber win the Wyndham, but essentially that's not a golf course where you get to open your shoulders much, and he was able to win. And that's the thing for me, like basically the first 6 months of the year, he didn't hole a putt and he kept doing okay. And I think it's one of those, if you didn't have the stats, you'd be like, well, there's a lot of hype about this guy, but he's just all right. But then you look at it and he is a freak off the tee, like a complete freak. Better, I know we say it a lot about golfers. He's a really good off the tee. This guy is another level. He is a McIlroy standard driver, or close to it. And yeah, the other stuff seems to be falling into place. Yeah, he's the 6th player in the last 20 years to have 2 rounds of 62 or lower in a PGA Tour event and not win. Some the other names on the list: Matt Jones, Patrick Rogers at the RSM. They were bookend 62s at the weekend, weren't they? Tommy Fleetwood, Kevin Na, and Steve Stricker.
We need to try and track down Patrick Rogers if he's playing the British Masters again, because he played last year and we didn't quite get to chat to him. But this year, if he comes over again, which I think he might do, because his wife's English, I believe, and he likes to come over. So I want to talk to him. But anyway, let's move on to some other stuff. So you had a note here about talking about sort of players who continuing to wait for their maiden PGA Tour win. So we've got Alex Noren and Beau Hossler, who obviously went close at the Wyndham Championship. I mean, any particular comments on that? I mean, Alex Noren is, we know what he has achieved in the game, and he's won many, many times on European soil. It just feels like one of those who, I don't know, it's not, I don't think it's a mental thing. I think it's just not quite happening, and I suspect it will, but who knows? He's getting older, isn't he? How old is he now? 38
or something like that.
Oh, is he? Okay, he's older than I thought.
40s. Yeah, and he's had injuries, and he came, it was quite late that he came to the PGA Tour, and he has played over 200 events, but that does include probably 30 majors, and these days a heck of a lot of top field. I know the Wyndham wasn't, but he plays a lot of signature events and the playoffs, and all these events. They're just really hard to win, and as you say, this is someone who's achieved a heck of a lot in the game. He's played in the Ryder Cup and so on. So I don't, putting him alongside Beau Hossler is a little bit hard on Noren. Yeah. Hossler, it's hard. It was hard to watch the Wyndham, and despite everything I've said about the idea of the fluidity of being quote unquote clutch, like it could happen for him one Sunday where he just goes out there and he's found a new level of calm on the course and something helps him. It could happen, but a player of his standard doesn't get a lot of chances to win. And watching how fidgety and how slow he was, and how wayward he is off the tee in general, it becomes difficult to imagine him winning. It doesn't mean he won't. Players have done it before, but that was tough to watch. On the flip side, I did want to just pay credit to Matt Wallace, who's fallen just short of making the playoffs. But there's a guy who, I do think he thrives in that environment. I think Wallace, for me, is one of those players who does get the most out of his ability, actually. And he birdied the last hole in the Rocket Classic from 50 feet. And then hit it to 5 feet on the last hole of the Wyndham and made birdie. It's the second hardest hole on the golf course. And at that point, it was like birdie gives him a chance to get through, and he didn't get through in the end. But I thought it was really impressive, and I did feel a bit sorry for him, actually, that he didn't get to advance. But it's probably to our benefit, because he'll be another, I would hope, who is at the Belfry in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, no, I have tremendous amount of respect for anyone who is playing on both tours, but actually playing pretty regularly on both tours. And he's probably played more than anyone, I would suggest, on the DP World Tour, whilst being a sort of full-time PGA Tour member. So it's, it's harsh that he came up just short, but obviously it's a much better season than he did last year. He's comfortably locked up his card for next year. So it's a result in many ways. But yeah, he definitely gets the most out of his game, and he is, exactly to your point, when his back's against the wall is when he's dangerous. And obviously we're some way off talking about real proper Ryder Cup discourse, but he is one that I would like to see him get a chance, because he's desperate to be there, and I think he would really thrive in that setting. I really do. But there's obviously a lot of brilliant players who are going to be vying for a place alongside him. But yeah, we'll see what the next year brings. But it's a good season for him, really.
I'm at the risk here, Sam, of like us just chatting and all of a sudden the hour's gone, because I'm thoroughly enjoying getting to catch up about all things golf. Very quick question, and you can skip loads of stuff on the list instead. I've got a player that just came to mind when you were talking about someone who you just love to see have that Ryder Cup opportunity. Obviously, for you, Wallace is one. Are there any others that come to mind? If not, I'll just name mine. But someone who you think I'd love to see them in that environment and they never got the chance.
I can't think of any off the top of my head apart from him. So if you've got one, I'd like to hear.
For me, it's Pablo Larrazabal, who has won. You see a guy, I think he's won 10 times on the DP World Tour, but he was one of those, and Hughes Loughton did it as well. And back in the day, Johan Edfors, they're always winning at the wrong time, and it's been a bit like that with Wallace. Like, he's not, if he just wins at the right time, he will get a go. But yeah, Pablo Larrazabal is one of those. Like, he's won some really big tournaments just at the wrong years, odd numbered years in the past. It would be even numbers now, but I would love to have seen him if I crack at it, and just see that, the passion he brings to a normal tour event, what it would have brought out in him. But I don't think we'll ever know with Pablo, but there's definitely time for Matt.
Yeah. What should we talk about next, Ben? You've got a few things, so we might not have time for all of them, but you've made a note here. Jordan Spieth, the only player in the top 70, so the only player getting into the playoffs without a top 10 this year. It's a curious one, isn't it? Because you'd sort of say it's been a bad season for him, but to be in the top 70, he kind of done a hell of a lot wrong. But obviously, we know that he's nowhere near the standard that he's winning sort of multiple majors. But what's your thoughts on Spieth at the moment?
I hate saying this, but I feel like something's got to change, hasn't it? Like, whether it's the caddy, I'm not one. For many years, I defended Rory McIlroy's decision to stick with Harry Diamond, but those two are friends since childhood. Obviously, Michael Grella's been with Jordan pretty much since he became a professional, so it would be difficult. You've got his coach, Cameron McCormick, as well. I don't know. So, but you just look from the outside in, you're like, I'd love personally to see him try something new, because it might help. As for him getting into the playoffs, critics will say, well, that's because he's getting into events he shouldn't get into and they don't have a cut and he picks up points. I think he's played some really good golf at times this year, and I think actually his year was encapsulated by the Wyndham. I think he went out of bounds off the very first tee of the tournament, an easy opening tee shot, and he's gone out of bounds with an iron. And then on the third round, he absolutely striped it, and it's just, he can't put it all together. I hope he does, but I think maybe something needs to change.
Yeah, and I really hope, I know I've said this before, I think he's an electric player to watch, and I think he does draw eyeballs to the game, so I hope that he can get it back. It feels like there's something missing, and yeah, maybe you're right, maybe something needs to change. I don't know what that is. The caddy conversation is always a hard one, isn't it? Especially when they've been together such a long time. But yeah, I wouldn't hate to see a little change. Maybe it's just a case of just Grella takes a couple of weeks off and he gets someone else in just for a bit, just to kind of, maybe remind him, what he likes about Grella, or, why they're a good team. I don't know.
Because it is a bit like, sometimes it's like a parent and child, isn't it? It's like parent and petulant teenager sometimes, or I know Grella used to be a teacher, and it is a bit like a teacher and a slightly wayward student sometimes, and there's a great comedic value to it where Grella's just like, yeah, okay, Jordan. But on some level, I'd be sad, obviously, if that partnership ended. What we all really want is to see them win a tournament and just fix it together. And he's got an enormous talent. I know I'm probably a bit of sort of misty-eyed romantic or something. I don't know, maybe a bit weak, but it saddens me that Jordan Spieth has become a bit of a joke, which he is in some circles. He's like an internet meme, and the guy is a superstar, or he was. He's won 3 majors. He's world number 1. He was just one of the most talented players this game has seen in the last 30 years. And to see him now just being known really for the fact that he might hit it into a garbage can and make par. That's not what I know. What I know Jordan Spieth for is that he can go on a burst of birdies and make the game look simple, actually. Actually, now he makes it look complicated. So we'll see where he ends up.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, he has become the meme golfer, unfortunately. Solheim Cup, we wanted to talk about that briefly. So Esther Henseleit birdied. Well, you said she birdied the last hole. This is of the Women's Open, presumably, keeping Tambellini out the side by a very, very fine margin, and then Tambellini wasn't selected. So picks Leona Maguire. She's not had a great year, but we know what, talking about players who sort of thrive in that sort of environment, you can't find many better than Leona Maguire. So no great surprise to see her picked. Lopez Ramirez, she's had no top 10s, you may know, since March. Nadaud, no top 10s this year. Mimi Rhodes, she's not had a great year. And then Nordqvist ruled selecting herself out. So it's not the strongest European team, or at least in terms of depth. Obviously, the top part of the team is pretty strong. The likes of Charlie Hull and Lottie Woad, who've both been playing very well lately. But yeah, it's not the deepest European team.
It doesn't look it, does it? And there's some really awkward aspects to this. One is Tambellini missing out by 0.9 points. So if anyone missed this, Esther Henseleit, who put up a magnificent effort to be second in the Women's British Open, beating a shot. In the playoff, and birdied the last hole. If that birdie putt doesn't go in from 40 feet, then Tambellini makes the side. And the thing about that is that Henseleit would have been picked anyway. So I think, I don't know, it's really harsh, undoubtedly, on Tambellini. And I suppose we were talking about this in the President's Cup. You asked how relevant the points list is. Well, clearly it wasn't that relevant to Anna Nordqvist because she left out Tambellini, and I think the telling point is everybody expected her to do that. The awkward point is that Nordqvist really is currently a better golfer than several of those wildcards. And the US, I think, ended up regretting the decision to go with an active world-class player. Nordqvist is borderline world-class, I suppose you'd say, but it backfired with Keegan Bradley. That became a story. Obviously, the Solheim Cup's not as big, doesn't generate as many headlines, so it's not quite the same. But you do worry that if Europe were to lose the first session 4-0 or whatever, and we've got Anna Nordqvist, a vastly experienced, high-class golfer, sat there watching it with a headset on rather than her golf clubs out, it may look a mistake to have appointed her, and then even a mistake for her to have not said, do you know what, I can bring more to this team by playing than by watching. But I hope that's all unfounded. And, Mimi Rhodes in particular, she's missed a lot of cuts this year, but I do suspect she'll do okay. And hopefully sometimes when you've got a bunch of wildcards who have a bit to prove, it's not totally uncommon for them to come out and prove something.
This is true, but if I'm to put the question to you now, who do you think is going to win the Solheim Cup? I mean, it's obviously we're on European soil. We talked about maybe a slightly weak European team. Gun to your head, who are you saying?
I think the US will win it. I think the only thing is that Bernardus, where they're playing it, is it's a modern links golf course, right? And if it's not Lytham by any means, but Nelly Corda, although she battled hard all week in the Women's Open and finished close up in the end. Links golf definitely brings her back to the pack. And I would guess, you could say that about quite a few of the American side. And the summer we've had in Europe, Bernardus will definitely play firm. So I think it will be a leveler, but I have to come down on the side of the superior team. I think it's a bit different to the Ryder Cup, which I think will be, a lot of people think Europe will just win because it's at home and Europe always win. I think that'll be really close, but I can at least make an argument the European side, has quality to match the Americans almost through the board, like almost. I don't, not quite. Yeah. I think here the US are clearly superior, so I would have to vote for them.
I'm going to scoot us on to some listener suggestions now, Ben.
Please
because
do,
we put out a request for some sort of questions and topics, and we had a few through. So we've got this one's from Will Murray, winner of our Slice Golf Day, and he's asking about Rory McIlroy, and he's saying if Rory could choose to win only one event next year, what would it be? So we're looking at things like a three-peat at the Masters. We're looking at the Ryder Cup on home soil, of course. We're looking at the Irish Open, let's say. The Open at St Andrews is the big one. What do you think, Ben? What are you going for?
My initial reaction was that there's only one answer here, and it's a million miles clear of the rest. But the more I've thought about it, it's not as far clear. It's probably not that far clear, but I think the answer, unquestioningly, is the Open at St Andrews. I think everyone's heard the stories of him being in the hotel overlooking the 18th green, and how upset he was having lost out in 2022. He missed it in 2015 because of injury, and he was blown away on Friday in 2010 in that renewal won by Louis Oosthuizen. I think he is genuine when he talks about certain golf courses and the
cathedrals of golf.
The cathedrals of golf, indeed. And St Andrews, I think, is probably his number one career goal now. So the fact that the Ryder Cup's in Ireland, I think it does elevate that. But if he can only have one, it is 100% the Open at St Andrews. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I would have to agree. Yeah, that's the one. The cathedrals of golf he's talked about many times. Winning at the home of golf, winning an Open again. Yeah, it has to be. Now this one from Andrew Summers. So he says, what should the DP World Tour do with the live players who we've been reading about, have been reaching out about, potentially playing next year? So yeah, what are your initial thoughts of how they should handle those players who are wanting to come back? Maybe those who haven't previously had status. How do you deal with them?
I think it's fairly simple. I think, and that is the ones who've shown an appetite and the ones who have, there are live players who have earned status. So David Puig has status on the DP World Tour. I would say the ones who have a reasonable argument for some kind of status. And another example might be Tom McKibben. Now, I don't know exactly what his status would be, but the way he's played when he's come back to the DP World Tour, and the fact that he was, 11th or 12th on the race to Dubai, whatever he was the year he departed, and it's only a year ago, I should think his status would be secure by any normal measurement. Players like that, then I have no issue with. I think when you get to some of those like Jose Ballester, who is planning to play more on the DP World Tour this year, and even Caleb Surratt, Surratt had actually entered the German Challenge on the Hotel Planet Tour, and I believe the reason he didn't play is because he went and qualified for the Open, and focused on that instead. But it shows that these guys are exploring options. But for someone like Caleb Surratt, I'm sorry, I'd probably say you'd find a way to allow him to be exempt into final stage of Q School. I think that would feel reasonable. I don't know how exactly you would do that, but ultimately you got to go out and earn a place on the DP World Tour. It doesn't matter how good you are. They don't give these out for free. Matt Fitzpatrick had to earn it through the Hotel Planet Tour when he turned pro. So did Tommy Fleetwood. Why would you allow players like that to bypass the existing systems? Like, go out and earn it, let them play. But there's got to be a level of making them go down the ladder. They can't come in at the top.
What about the likes of, I'm just plucking names out the air here, but people like Victor Perez, for example, or maybe Thomas Dietrich? Obviously they're going to be banned from playing the PGA Tour for a year after their last live start. But for players like that, without knowing their exact status at the point they left, what would their comeback look like?
Yeah, it's interesting because those who've Perez and Dietrich, to my understanding, in fact, certainly haven't resigned their membership. So now, obviously, we've got to this situation where they're not fining them, and the waters are much calmer. And I think there's clearly, with players like that, there is a benefit to the DP World Tour, and that's why, really, in essence, while they took that defensive action in the first instance, and put up an immediate guard, they have lowered that guard and allowed these players to accept sponsor invites. And some of them, like Thomas Dietrich, he has status via last year's Race to Dubai. So he and Tom McKibben still has status as well. Now, what happens to that status at the end of this year is the question, because again, without looking straight forwardly at their results, I imagine neither of them has done enough as things stand as he loads the Race to Dubai. Well, there you go. Dietrich's currently 99th. So, he has every opportunity. And actually, McKibben's 115th, and they have got tournaments they can play this year. So whatever happens, they would have some sort of conditional status for next year. Yeah, I guess that's the answer there. Whereas there'll be players who have left, like Adrian Meronk. Now, he will be nowhere near the top of the Race to Dubai. He's 201st. So I'm afraid, he could have played more tournaments on the DP World Tour.
So it's back to Q school then for Meronk.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Because otherwise you're awarding status based on achievements of 3 or 4 years ago. And really, we've got some ways of measuring how good Adrian Meronk is right now. I think you'd have a hard time arguing that he definitely kept his card with a full season on the DP World Tour. We will never know. There's no way of knowing. So it's really complicated. I definitely, without knowing the inner workings and the exact details of every player's status, I would say the basic argument would be that those who have shown an appetite to keep playing the DP World Tour and retain their membership and so on, you would definitely, I don't mind sort of making things a little bit easier for them, or allowing them certain bypasses, i.e. to final stage rather than second stage. I don't think Adrian Meronk should be playing first stage Q school at Donington Club or whatever it is, but nor do I think he should be able to come back and go, well, look, I was one of your best players when I left, so give me my card back. That seems unfair to the members who did not leave.
Yeah, agreed. The next one we've got here, I believe this is from Tom. Correction, sorry if I'm wrong here, but there was a question anyway from someone saying, should courses that hold annual PGA Tour events be ineligible to host majors? So I suppose we're talking about, in sort of recent memory, obviously Quail Hollow last year hosted the PGA Championship, didn't it? Pebble Beach has hosted the US Open on a few occasions. I'm trying to think of other ones. Riviera, I suppose, is coming up, isn't it?
Belle Reve is back this week, and that would be a hard one because it's 7 years since it hosted a major, but it has hosted a major fairly recently.
What are your thoughts? I mean, I don't. It's a tricky one to sort of weigh up, because there are some courses that I think, we don't really need to see Quail Hollow in a major championship setting, particularly. But Pebble Beach, I think it'd be a shame for that one to be lost from the major roster. So it's hard to sort of apply it fairly when you look at sort of the standard of some of these golf courses. And that's not to knock Quail Hollow, which I think gets a bit of unfair stick, but there are some courses that clearly a lot of people would put in their top 10, around the world, and Pebble Beach would be in a lot of people's top 10s, I suspect.
Yeah, I agree entirely with you. I think it's a fair argument, but if you would lose more in making that rule than you gain. So I can stomach once every 10 years at Quail Hollow in the PGA Championship if they must do that, if it means we can exempt Pebble Beach from being subject to the same restrictions. So I don't really have an issue. It doesn't happen often enough to bother me. I think I would rather frame this as, can we not demand more of the the PGA of America, that they get a bit more creative with the venues they go to, although next year they're going to a venue that I think a lot of people will hate. So, that's, it's careful what you wish for. A lot of people will be wishing it was Quail Hollow, not me, but a lot of people will. I just think we should be more demanding of the organisers to go to more interesting and diverse golf courses. rather than place upon them an arbitrary restriction.
Okay, and then next, so this is from Titanic, I believe. He's asked for some predictions. So who will win the FedEx Cup, firstly?
Rory
Who you going for,
McIlroy.
Ben?
Rory McIlroy.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to say Scotty Scheffler because I think he's going to win this week. I know you think he's going to win this week. And if he does, he goes quite a long way towards that. And I
well,
think
no, they've changed all that, haven't they? It's just
oh god,
the FedEx Cup winner is just who wins the Tour Championship, which is why I have chosen Rory McIlroy.
Oh yeah, okay, fine, yeah.
So
okay.
basically, all you're asking here is who's going to win the Tour Championship.
Wait a second.
Now, there is
if you're saying
Sorry,
if you're saying who's going to win at Eastlake, then I'm changing my answer to Xander Schauffele. There we go.
FedEx Cup winner.
Yep.
He would make perfect sense. It's quite often someone who's not done that much all year and just likes Eastlake. So silly system.
I completely forgotten they changed that, to be honest.
That says a lot in itself, not about you, but about the system.
No, I know, unfortunately, yeah, it does. And it will change, obviously, again, next year, we're told that it's going to go to... Is it next year or the year after it's going to match play? It might be the year after. But, yeah, but they may be changing... There may be an interim change next year, but we'll see. Who will make the US President's Cup side? I think we spent a while on that already, so I'm going to skip on to... So revisiting our winners in 2026 list. We've not done brilliantly, Ben. We've only actually got one each. So I got Casey Jarvis. I mean, he got 2 wins, and you got Chikara, who's got 2 wins. So, but no, none of our other ones have actually ticked off a win yet. We've had a few close shaves. But
we have.
Yeah, Let's see what the next few weeks brings. I'm still feeling confident, Ben. I've got to be honest with my selections.
You did have 10 to my 9, so you should be confident.
You say that. You're referring to Elvis Smiley, I believe, and I chose to put Tom McKibben on my list, so you could put them in the same.
Didn't you? Yeah,
you could put them in the same bracket. I mean, I've got there was a few that I'm sure a few of mine that you would have had on your list, and vice versa. I mean, I've got to recap. I've got Iora. Who he's got to win at some point, but he just keeps falling short, doesn't he? Coover has not had a great season. Tristan Lawrence, I really thought was going to do better on his return to DP World Tour soil. Jakob Skov-Olesen has been playing really well. It wouldn't surprise me if he wins this week or at some point soon. So I'm still confident with that one. Jarvis, we mentioned. McKibben isn't playing much, is he? But he's of a very good grade that when he does come back, he went close, didn't he, recently? So. I don't know. Matt Wallace. I put him on there, and he's been playing really well both sides of the pond. Marcus Armitage, he's been close a couple of times. He's another one who keeps kind of putting himself there. Repetto Taylor, that gamble hasn't really paid off yet. He's just had a couple of okay starts, but I thought he might have a better rookie season. And Robertson Thompson, he went close earlier on in the season, so I'm not unhappy with how my team's performed, despite the lack of wins, which is obviously what the metric that we're being judged on here. You've got Ben Wenyuding. He's probably not excelled this season, has he? But are you still confident with him?
He has been the Alton Towers' biggest disappointment of the year award winner, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Rosner.
Well, he's played plenty of good golf, not really had much of a chance to win. But you wouldn't be surprised if he did. Go on, keep going. There's some bad names on this list.
Well, Daniel Hillier, I think that's one I wanted on my list.
Should have won the Bahrain Championship, really, but there we are.
Yeah. And then we got Lindell. He's he went close, didn't he, at KLM?
Yeah, happy with him.
Smiley is now injured, so he's probably not going to be playing for a little while. So you might not get any joy with that one. Tom Vaillant.
Yeah, he had 1 or 2 good weeks, but he's one of those I sort of don't really know what I was thinking, to be honest.
Alejandro Del Rey, I think, was a really good shout, sort of lower down the pecking order, because he's had a couple of times that he's been there or thereabouts. So I
think he's gone up a level, actually. He's become a more rounded player. But I also think that many of the best chances for him are behind us. So, I don't expect him to win now this season, but if he doesn't, then he's the sort of one I'd be happy to have on my list again next season.
And then Loughton and Bairstow were your last 2.
I think I got hung up on the fact that Loughton turned 40, and that does provoke, Bernd Wiesberger is a good example of someone who's turned 40 and kicked on. But Bairstow has had a tough year, obviously, since the episode a year ago this week, actually. He's not really gone to the next level, but he's got talent. We'll see. But again, we're now into the part of the season where for all of these players, it's going to get harder, isn't it?
It is.
There are just really good fields almost every week now. So, yeah, we'll see. Who's going to win the race to Dubai, Sam? Briefly.
Race to Dubai, I'm going to put it out there. Eugenio Chacarra.
Nice. Third place as things stand. He could have just about got into second by the time you're listening to this. Okay, I think Rory McIlroy will win it. It's a surprise of no one, but I do think there's a good chance here for Ryan Fox to have a run at it, because you could see, you look at what's to come with the big points events, like there is no reason Fox can't threaten at Wentworth, in Ireland, and in the Dunhill Links. And all of a sudden, if you do that, I think Yas Links would be a good course for him. If you win one of those tournaments, you've got a really good chance going into the... I know he doesn't have a great record in the DP World Tour Championship, but I think Ryan Fox could be the... he could run with his open success and threaten, but McIlroy's going to win, so what are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, he almost certainly is, but I felt like I had to be a contrarian and say someone else. And we like Eugenio having come on the pod, and and he's playing 12. He said he's playing 12 of the next 13 weeks, so he's definitely putting in the effort. Right, in the news, there's a few things. We can't spend a load of time on this, but the big news while I was away, which I sort of kind of kept abreast of to an extent. So Scott O'Neill, CEO of Live Golf, has revealed that he's got an investor who has signed a term sheet, and that investor is BC Capital. We know that, do we? Is that I sort of saw that was rumoured? Has that now been confirmed?
Well, their CEO was at Liv's event in New Jersey. Him and about 15 other people, as far as I could tell by watching the odd clip.
Well, and Yasser Al-Rumayyan was there, wasn't he? Was he not?
And the president. So that's three people who didn't pay and a dozen who did. Now, I'm being facetious, obviously, but it wasn't a particularly well attended event, to say the least.
Yeah, but it is big news to a degree. I mean, obviously, we don't know the finer details of it, and we may hear more in the coming weeks. But it's, I think a lot of people, us included, thought that this year may well be the end of Live, and it seems like it may rumble on. Whether or not it rumbles on in a kind of meaningful sense, and the big question, of course, is whether Jon Rahm will be playing. Well, Bryson DeChambeau, to an extent, I suspect that he will be if Liv is still around. Jon Rahm, I think, is the one where there's a big question mark over him, and it kind of depends, I suppose, on his contract and whether he can get out of it. But is this, is it meaningful news that it is going to likely continue for another year?
Well, I suppose it depends on your perspective, doesn't it? I will say there seems to be a turning of the tide in certain areas where people who've been wedded to the success of Liv are sort of seeming to accept that the future is pretty bleak regardless. I guess, I've said before, I think in many ways it's actually worse if it limps on trying to flog something that is just not popular enough. And I think that I understand Scott O'Neill's job as a CEO. He wouldn't be the only CEO in the world who steps up and paints a very positive picture of something far more complex. So I don't necessarily criticize him for that, but I do wish he would face and then answer some of the questions where I feel there's a severe lack of logic and alignment. Like, from what we hear, there's going to be 5 events in the US next year, and they're still talking about, the phrase has changed. I don't know if you've noticed this. It's gone from growing the game to the game being a force for good. So you can expect to see that. I mean, what does it mean, Sam? It doesn't mean anything, does it? They're not bloody UN peacekeepers. It's a game of golf, for God's sake. It's not a force for good. What does it even mean? But anyway, apparently drinking from a shoe in Adelaide makes golf a force for good. The point is, at the moment, the schedule for next year looks like it'll be 10 events across established markets, right? They'll go to, surely they're going to go to the UK. That event was a success. They're going to go to Spain, they're going to go to Korea, they're going to go to South Africa, and they're going to go to Australia. I fail to understand how this aligns with their stated goals. And 5 events in the USA, when genuinely hardly anyone went to watch last week's, doesn't make sense to me. And I think it'll be one mistake is understandable, and you can argue with Rahm still whether it was a mistake, even if he doesn't get all the money he's owed. But to make the same mistake again, I think would be ridiculous. I think if Jon Rahm plays on Live next year, he's not being well advised by his management, and I think he'd be making a huge mistake. So hopefully he does the right thing, and hopefully he's on the DP World Tour for a year. We'll see.
And what of Bryson? So he was quoted as saying, "I'd love to be able to play on the PGA Tour too. I think that's the best for golf. I'd love that. I think that's where everybody wants to be. There isn't a golf fan on the planet who doesn't want to see me play a big tour event."
I'm raising my hand slowly here for the YouTube viewers. No, Again, I've said before, I think the PGA Tour would be better off with Bryson because I think we do need villains. We need good golfers as well. But I think the bottom line is everyone will have personal preference. But one of the things we have learned over the last few years is that the PGA Tour, love it or not, I don't think it's perfect, but the PGA Tour can survive. It's surviving without Tiger Woods right now. Rory McIlroy has barely played this year, and viewership is up. Loads of people tuned in to watch Koivu win. People tune in to watch Torbjornsson and Brennan, and they will because golf tells us over and over again on a repeating cycle that players come and go, and that the product fundamentally is what people tune in for. And the history and the familiarity and the significance and things like timing and being able to watch it in the UK on a Sunday night is great for me. Like I love that, and I'm sure that is a factor for people. But the tour does not need Bryson DeChambeau. Would it be slightly better with him? Yeah, arguably. Is he going to transform the PGA Tour by coming back? Absolutely not. And for me, again, perhaps a little bit naive and juvenile even, but I just think when someone talks in terms like that, it makes me not want them. If he thinks he's the savior, and I think it's why he'll stay with Liv, because I think he wants to be seen as the face of a golf tour, and at the moment that could be Liv, but I hope to God it's not the PGA Tour.
Well, I think this is a problem, and you know what? I was thinking about this a few days ago. And I was thinking I sort of miss the sort of old Bryson, the sort of quirky scientist Bryson, who was sort of like he's a bit different, and you could kind of love him or loathe him. Now there's it's become a real sort of ego show, and it's very much like it's all about me, and you need me, and it's like, well, we don't really, like as someone said, I can't remember who it was who said maybe 4 times a year is the perfect amount of times for us to watch Bryson, and I think
that genuinely is a great line, isn't it? Yeah.
Right, there's other stuff we talk about. I will mention very quickly. Friend of the pod, Webb Simpson, named as President's Cup assistant, something we actually asked him about, and he said that he wanted to be there, and he is going to be there. So obviously good news for him. I'm going to do a little forgotten golfer of the week, Ben. It's a sad one, unfortunately. I'm sure you would have read about this. Others may not have done, but former PGA Tour player, Canadian player Matt McQuillan, died a few days ago. He was only 45 years old. I'm 45 years old, so I think it sort of hit home a little bit. I don't think we know the cause of death or anything at this stage, but just to talk a little bit about his career. He didn't play a huge amount of times on the PGA Tour, but he earned his PGA Tour card through Q School in 2010, which anyone who can earn a card through Q School has got to be pretty good. And he didn't make many cuts in that year, but he did have a few big finishes. He finished third in the John Deere Classic, final round 64. He was tied for 6th at the Reno Tahoe Open that same year. And actually, I looked at where he finished. He was only just outside of the top 125 to keep your card back then. I think he was 137th, so he wasn't really that far off from keeping his card. And then had sort of conditional status the following year, didn't play very well, and then it sort of dropped off. But he'd been working with the next generation of Canadian golfers, by all accounts, since then, and it's a sort of sudden death and a bit of a shock. So, yeah, just wanted to mention him. It's a sad one, but I felt like he deserved a mention.
A lovely tribute, Sam. A lovely use of our feature. Well done.
Yeah, and there's something. I think it's a feature that's going to stay, isn't it, Ben?
Well, I'm enjoying it. I've got a proposal in future episodes that we leave a clue in our intro for listeners to think about before we get to it, because I think some people might want to play along and try and guess who we may be talking about, but we can discuss that in our regular admin meetings, can't we?
We can. Right, a quick word from our sponsors, True Linkswear, a company that's committed to crafting high-quality golf gear so that you can enjoy the walk on or off the course. True is a collective of family and friends dedicated to sharing their passion and excitement, footwear, apparel, and the game with you. And Slice listeners can get 15% off all True footwear and apparel with the code SLICED. Now, before we sign off, Ben, we will talk very briefly about the world of golf this week. This week, of course, being the week that we're talking about, not the week that we're in. And that begins with the DP World Tour is the Nexo Championship, which is at Trump Aberdeen. Any thoughts on this? So is this the same course that it was last year? It is, right? Yes.
Yeah,
So
and it held the recent event on the Stay Shore Tour where Michael Block withdrew.
That's right. Okay. And I did want to say, actually, when in hindsight, when I look back at this, this may have been a miss from our top 20 courses on DP World Tour. Like, I know that it's a very new one, so it's kind of hard it hasn't got the history that many have. But actually, a lot of players, I think it was Richard Mansell who said it might be the best course I've ever played. It is a really good golf course. And obviously last year was particularly windy. We don't know what the forecast is going to be like at the time that we're recording, but hopefully the wind blows again, because it's a good test, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And just notes on the field. So Patrick Reed's in the field. So we just talked about the Race to Dubai. He's the Race to Dubai leader. John Daly's son is in the field, and Mathieu Pavon comes back from the PGA Tour, where he's shown a few good signs. He's driving the ball brilliantly, but he can't do the rest. So we'll see how he gets on. Nearly won the Scottish Open once, so could be of some interest. But anyway, it's a good field because of Patrick Reed's presence. And this was the return event last year, but this time it's the second, and it benefits a little bit from that, I think. So yeah, it'd be a good tournament to watch.
Yeah, and then PGA Tour, it's going to be the second playoff event, which is the BMW Championship, which is at Belle Rive. This is where Brooks Koepka won the 2019 PGA Championship. Any immediate thoughts on this course specifically? I have to be honest, I don't greatly remember it from the PGA Championship.
No, I mean, my memories of that are that Adam Scott and Tiger Woods were in the mix. I'm sure there were others. Feel like, can't remember. So no, not at the time we're speaking. I've not looked into it. I expect it will be long and soft, and of its type. But I don't mind going back to a golf course like Belle Rive. It's a shame Koepka didn't manage to get into the field, obviously, but yeah, we'll see. It's these playoff events have lost a little something. We're in the sort of, as we've discussed, we're in this period where the identity of the playoffs is a little bit unclear. So I'm a little bit underwhelmed by them in general, to be honest. It's sort of roll on September for golf in America.
Yeah, and then LPGA is going to be the CPKC Women's Open. So it's the Canadian Open, essentially, which returns to Royal Mayfair. You've made a note here where Lydia Ko won a second successive title while still an amateur. I'm not too familiar with that word, but is that Ontario based? Royal Mayfair?
Why have you asked me that, Sam? I have no idea. I'm certain it's in Canada. So yeah,
they're always in Ontario, these big events nowadays.
Sure.
There was a time that I used to roam around, but I feel like now they just go for the capital.
Let's go with that. Yeah, that's where it is.
And then Corn Ferry Tour is the Advent Health Championship. This is in Missouri. You've made notable for being Cam Young's first of back-to-back wins. So yeah, maybe one to favour the Bombers.
Yeah, it definitely is, looking at the past winners. But it's a good tour, the Corn Ferry Tour at the minute. It's fascinating every week, and now we've got a couple of really good PGA Tour players who didn't quite make the playoffs who are down there as well. And then you got all these sort of college PGA Tour university graduates. Another one of those won the week before last. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's going to be a good end to that season, and definitely some stars of the future. Yeah,
and then lastly, the Hotel Planet Tour is the Finnish Challenge at Virumäki, where Laurie Ruska shot 59. Wow.
He did. It was in the glory days. He shot 59 and just went and won by about 7 shots. But they call this the Cook course now, and I'm not quite sure why. I thought it was the Cookie course for a minute, which was why I started saying this, but it's now not at all interesting. But yeah.
Is Minwoo Lee in the field?
Say again, sorry.
I say, is Minwoo Lee in the field?
He's not very good, not in the field, but it is a strong field. Obviously, the week we just had, a fair few of the best players on the Hotel Planet Tour played the Danish Golf Championship instead, but this is going to be a really strong field. And obviously we're into the sort of final third of the season, and we said before, only the top 15 get full status now, so pressure's on.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap up there, Ben. Now, it hasn't obviously been a normal format show, as we've sort of said, but we will be next week going back to our usual format. Because it's not our usual format, there is no highest bidder. So sorry for anyone who is disappointed about that. But this is a good time to say, if you have any topics, we do need some. So please send them in if you've got any good topics for us to tackle on highest bidder next time or over the coming weeks. But meanwhile, thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back next Monday.